all ships heading for Ukrainian waters could be potential military targets. That's according to a fresh threat from Moscow. Earlier this week, the Kremlin allowed a deal on the export of grain via the Black Sea to expire. Now it says ships could be carrying weapons to Ukraine and warned that countries sending ships would be considered parties to the war on Ukraine's side. Already, Russia has stepped up attacks on Ukraine's port cities. Missiles have rained down on Odessa, where local officials say a security guard was killed, and Mykolaiv for the third consecutive night. The strikes reportedly hit residential areas and injured dozens. Washington has warned that Russia declaring the Black Sea unsafe could become a way to justify attacks on civilian ships. In his nightly address, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attacks on the port cities showed how Russian aggression was having an impact far beyond Ukraine's borders.
This terrorist attack proves that their target is not only Ukraine and not only the lives of our people. In the ports that were attacked today, there were about 1 million tons of food stored. It's precisely that amount which should have already been delivered to countries in Africa and Asia. With each strike, we appeal to our partners again and again. Ukraine's ear shield requires reinforcement.
For more, we are now joined by our correspondent, Nick Connolly, who is in Kyiv. Nick, so Russia keeps targeting port cities.
Well, that's true. We've had now news of a second casualty in Mykolaiv, dozens more wounded, as you mentioned there. We understand that just under half of the Russian missiles were downed by Ukrainian forces, but they say, firstly, these were some of Russia's faster and more modern cruise missiles, and secondly, shooting down missiles over the sea is a lot harder because it's harder to position radars in the right kinds of places. So these are cities that are very, very vulnerable. Whereas in previous days, we'd seen attacks on the port facilities. We'd seen 60,000 tons of grain in one of the port facilities burnt. Today was about residential buildings, also administrative buildings, so different targets, but certainly a sense that these are cities that are very, very vulnerable, and Ukraine simply doesn't have enough in the way of anti-missile systems to protect all the big city centres.
As a result, there are palpable fears at the moment that Russia will be targeting Ukraine-bound ships. Is Ukraine still determined to continue making those grain exports?
I mean, just to be clear, seen from Kyiv, this is nothing short of a Russian attempt at a naval blockade, full-scale blockade of Ukraine's ports. I think there'd been a bit of hope earlier in the week that Russia might not directly attack ships, that it would just not guarantee safety, that there might be issues with mines, and that some kind of alternative arrangement, maybe Turkey providing security to merchant shipping, might allow some continued export. I think that is increasingly looking unlikely. There's more aggressive tones coming out of Moscow now, and Ukrainian government sources talking about just a scramble now to look for alternatives, maybe via the Black Sea, trying to the Danube into the Black Sea, trying to send smaller ships into Romania that would avoid those open territorial waters where Russia could attack, land routes, train routes, but it's all pretty difficult right now. The capacity simply isn't there, and I think we're going to see rising grain prices pretty soon.
DW's Nick Connolly reporting from Kyiv. Many thanks, Nick. I'm joined now by Johannes Peters. He's head of Maritime Strategy and Security at the Kiel University Institute for Security Policy. Johannes, a dramatic warning from the White House that Russia may target civilian ships in the Black Sea. Would Russia have any legal basis in maritime law for such drastic action?
Well, no, there's no legal basis for attacking third-party civilian commercial shipping.
So Russia has made it clear, however, that all ships proceeding to Ukrainian ports in the Black Sea waters will be considered potential carriers of military cargo. But presumably that wouldn't offer them grounds for Russia to outright attack those vessels as opposed to stopping and searching them, correct?
Not necessarily. Whenever you take some action, you have to calculate the measures you take, and just the suspicion of civilian ship may carrying military cargo does not justify attacking the ship with for example anti-ship cruise missiles or something like that. So that's not a legal basis for Russia to attack commercial shipping.
Well, explain that more. I mean, Russia is at war with Ukraine. Now, one can argue whether they are right to start this war or not. But what would be the precedence in an action like this if Russia suspected that a ship was carrying military cargo in a war against them? What could happen legally?
It's not that easy, actually, because when the ship normally, if it would be a Ukrainian flagged vessel, so a Ukrainian vessel, then it's a different thing. But the shipping is it's international shipping, it's internationally flagged vessels, and so they're third-party vessels, and Russia can't just seize like a third-party vessel or even attack it. So I think the main reason behind the Russian threat is just to hinder shipping, as we have seen before the so-called grain deal came into play. The insurance rates were far too high, or there was even no insurance cover provided for commercial shipping to operate within the northern Black Sea, and I think that's exactly the aim Russia is pursuing now, coming back to creating a situation again where it's impossible for international shipping to actually operate in these waters, to export grain, because there's simply no insurance covers for the ship owners and for the managers, and that would effectively stop the grain exports. And I think that's the main aim Russia is pursuing currently in threatening the shipping. That's why they came up with these rather unspecific narrative of saying it's no longer a safe space, actually.
As I'm sure you're well aware, in the Second World War, merchant ships traveled across the Atlantic in convoys, essentially, protected by Allied warships. Could you see that happening as a solution to protect grain convoys leaving Ukrainian ports and sailing through the Black Sea?
No. Actually, in the Second World War, these ships belonged to the Allied forces. They belonged to the United States, and they belonged to the UK. So it was just easy to protect them with the US warships or UK warships. Now we have internationally flagged vessels, and the only reason or the only legal basis might be a UN resolution, but that's not going to happen with China and Russia being permanent members of the Security Council. So I don't see there a solution for an international coalition providing like escort operations for grain exports.
Enough said. That is maritime security expert Johannes Peters. Many thanks.
You're welcome.